Right, like call committee of the whole meeting for Monday, August 19th, 2024 to order. Roll call, please.
Mayor Gaffino.
Here.
Trustee Christensen.
Here.
Trustee Curtis. Trustee Lowry.
Here.
Trustee Nesrich.
Here. All right. Audience comments. Anybody like to speak? Trustee comments. All right. Item 1 under discussion. Steve.
Thank you, Mayor. Item number 1 is an empty lot currently at 415 South Lincoln Way. There is someone interested in putting a car wash and coffee shop on that lot. And so given some of the complexities of the site, Nathan is going to walk through a concept plan. We do this. We just did it at the last meeting. Once again, the concept plan is just to get the developer some feedback, some ideas going forward, and helps them evaluate the site before moving forward with the full process for zoning. So with that, I'm going to have Nathan run through everything.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So this is 415 South Lincoln Way, which was the old Callahan Car Company. They used car lot down there. They are closed and gone, and all the cars are gone. So it's just an open lot right now. And it's for sale. The current group is looking to purchase it to do a concept with 2 businesses, 2 different buildings. So that's a little unique. So we'd have to do a PUD. In the front, they're proposing a Scooters Coffee. If you've, there's a couple of them in the area. I don't know if any of you have been to a Scooters, but it's similar to Mocha in that it's a smaller building, mainly a drive-through concept. So to have a Scooters there with a drive-through around that, and then a car wash in the back. And the car wash user is Blue Penguin. They're kind of new to the Chicago market, but they have their facilities are more down south from what I understand. But kind of new to the Chicago market. So in both cases, you know, traffic would enter here and circle around. So if you're in the Scooters Coffee, your drive-through lane would be there. Car wash, you would come back and come through here. It's a tunnel car wash with free vacuums over there. Minimal parking on the site. Again, both uses are meant to be drive-through type uses. So 6 parking spaces for scooter and 3 for the car wash, might primarily be for the employees. I think Scooters, much like Mocha, would have a little outdoor area and maybe a bathroom, but not really, a full dining area inside. As part of this project, the current vacant lot would be redeveloped. So the old light poles, the old buildings, the old signs out there would all come out. The front, right now it's paved right to the curb of 31. So landscape would put in a compliant sidewalk. Some of those non-conforming items would be addressed. As you know, off of 31, there's a big hill as you go down towards the river. And that's why this kind of back part of the property hasn't been used. So their plan does show retaining walls, on the sides and the back. That would be something that have to be looked at in engineering in terms of how tall and structural integrity of all of that. But, they would be proposing some walls to kind of flatten out the site. So there's your Scooters. That's kind of their prototype model. And there's your Blue Penguin. I don't know if it comes with palm trees up here in Illinois or not. But maybe get some fake ones or replant them every year. I don't know. With that, the developer is here, so come on up and feel free to add anything I missed.
I have a question. I'm just curious as to why you'd want to put this there, knowing that there's a Dunkin' Donuts and a Mocha Coffee in 1 mile.
It's actually pretty common to put competitors within a short distance of each other. I mean, you look at a McDonald's, a Burger King, a Wendy's, they locate next to each other for a reason. It's usually traffic, good thoroughfares, whatever it may be at a specific site. But generally, that's kind of a norm in the retail world.
Just seems like it's a saturation point at that level, because then you go.
Yeah, there's
south,
there's
there really
Dunkin'
isn't
2
anything
doors
farther
down.
south.
Where's the Mocha? I'm sorry.
Because when you go farther south, there really is no place to get coffee down 31 South. but now we'll have 3 places within 1 mile.
And it's also right on the entrance to 88 too. So that's kind of the main driver there. As far as evaluating the site through scooters and through some of the market data, they're fans of it. They're not concerned about the competition of Dunkin' Donuts. I'm not familiar with where Mocha is located. I know Starbucks is located about three quarters of a mile to the south. But yeah, as far as the concern of oversaturation, that isn't a concern for the company. But thank you in general for taking the time today to review our concept. Nathan's been a big help in kind of getting to this point. My name's Tom Libo, local area developer. I've kind of developed everything from big, large commercial shopping centers, worked for a company called General Growth Properties, down to these 600 square foot scooters now. So between myself and then I also have Eric Carlson here. He works for the Koru Group. They're a local architect engineer. And then we also have Rushi Shah here, who is the founder of Revere Capital, and Revere is who is going to be purchasing this site. Rushi and his wife both own and operate Revere, named after their 2 children, family operated business, and what they tend to concentrate their resources on are housing and kind of commercial assets like what we're trying to do here today. The project itself, scooters, as Nathan took you through, and the Blue Penguin. As far as the concept for coffee, it's a new to the area. It's Midwest, located out of Omaha, but in the surrounding Midwestern states, making its way into Illinois. There's a few of them. One just opened, or is about to open on Route 59 in Naperville, and then a couple others on kind of tertiary markets. But what they're known for, great tasting coffee, really quick service times, can serve their customers in as low as 30 seconds. And that's kind of what they pride themselves on. And then Blue Penguin is primarily located in southern states, coming up to this area. Also known for quick service, being that this was a larger site, and that scooters take such a little footprint, being only 600 square feet, try to utilize the full space of this site, and that's where we thought the car wash would fit in the back. They're both kind of the way they operate. Obviously, coffee, people go buy coffee in the morning. Car wash is more heavy traffic during weekends, kind of late morning, early afternoon. So as far as traffic and what we consider happening on the site, we feel like it would be a good fit. Also, in terms of just the investor here for this location, they want some certainty instead of kind of speculatively developing this site and thinking of what else we might be able to put on the site. We thought that these 2 uses kind of complement each other, and they also take some of the guesswork out of it for the investor. So any questions? Happy to answer. If you guys get too technical, I'm going to call Eric up here and get everything answered for you.
I don't have any problem with it. No, and I actually kind of like the car wash in the back, a little bit out of sight, so yeah, I'm good with it.
Yeah, I like the idea as well. I mean, we had a car lot there that didn't do too well, and that back last half of that property was always just like a jungle. And I guess I only had concern is the stacking. Whether I can't see how many cars you kind of got in that drive-through loop. There's 8 or 10.
So about 11 in the drive-through for scooters, and then the goal obviously for the car wash, you'd probably be servicing anywhere up to like 20 to 25 at a time between what's in line and who's actually going through the car wash.
But the Mocha they mentioned, they stack out in the street sometimes, like at 6:30, 7 in the morning, which is
sure
could be a problem here, because when people get on the tollway on that northbound, I guess would be the west lane, they're backed all the way up. I mean, it's be a cluster. I mean, you'd have enough. I like the idea. I think that's good, and just that you don't have stacking out the street.
The stacking and the amount of lanes that we have right now are things that we can play with a little bit, in terms of how we enter potential if there was an overcrowded kind of issue, we could have almost a through lane that can get people in and out.
Well, in 30 seconds to get a coffee. I mean, you'll have to go pretty quick.
Yeah,
then.
hopefully we can
Yeah.
crank through and it's not a big issue, but that's the goal.
So
Yeah.
there are 10 stacking spaces from the order menu board here to the front. The front area here is the car parking area. They are showing 2 access points on 31, and right now there's only 1. So that might ripple through the final site plan as it comes back. I think that IDOT might tell you only get 1, or, you know, you never know what you're going to get when you go to them. Right now they're showing 2. You know, if it comes back to 1, then you use this one and you would have more stacking because you could wrap the front of the building too. So, you know, some of those details we'll get.
So I like that with the sidewalk because people from the north there from Edens, they go south and they go to Speedway there. And hopefully that stays open because, you know, they're wheelchairs and different scooters and things, and they're always going back and forth. So different, you know,
I
they
was
may even
actually-
be in your drive-through getting coffee even actually, but something to think about.
I was actually walking the site and kind of just taking it all in, and somebody came by on a scooter. And
Yeah.
I just looked and said, that's not safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to help the guy. I wanted to push him a little quicker to get.
But there is a grade change from your property you're talking about to the south to Speedway. I mean, it's pretty much
There is, yeah. And that's why we're looking pretty heavily into those retaining walls that Nathan mentioned.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I mean, I would say one concern is we were just looking at another potential project not far down the street, which was also looking to do a coffee shop and gas station and car wash. So,
Okay.
Oh, yeah, southbound lanes, but yeah.
Southbound.
but to
north of the-
continue
north of the
stacking up
highway.
all of this, that would be a little bit of a concern. I don't know that I would want to approve 2 of these back to back for both of those locations.
Where's the other one? Where are they contemplating the other one?
So Gas and Wash is looking at the corner of 31 and Airport Road. You know, they have drive-through. And in fact, I think Scooters is in a Gas and Wash in one of their locations. But, you know, they would have they want to have some kind of coffee user. They didn't know who. They don't have the tenants lined up yet, but they would have a drive-through space for some kind of food tenant.
Yeah, but when you think about it, northbound and southbound, I mean, we have a Starbucks on Orchard Road that's southbound, before the tollway, and there's one in Aurora southbound after the tollway. So everybody has different,
Right.
you know, different spots,
Especially
but
for coffee, especially
They
your
like to
point,
be
they-
on
but
the
I know
right-hand
that
side
road
of the
gets busy though.
before
Like I
the
said, that
entrance.
northbound, that they stack up on that tollway all the way. I mean, it's all the way through that Sullivan Road, that intersection just
Sure.
to south. Yeah, I mean, that one lane is just packed. So if you had cars stacking for your coffee place there and nobody can get around, I mean, it's
Yeah.
going to be
well, like I mentioned, we'll look at we'll look at our access and we'll look and see if it's possible to add a through lane where we could, you know, potentially have people get in and out fairly quickly if there was a stacking issue.
Yeah.
So they could still pull in.
right. Get off the
They
road.
wouldn't be on 31
Yeah.
and they could
Yeah.
kind of loop in and loop back out.
Yeah.
Do you guys have anything?
Okay.
Yep.
Anything else?
All right.
All right.
You're good. We're good.
Right. All right. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Item 2, Steve, tobacco
thank you.
code.
Thank you, Mayor. Item number 2 is, as Mike's role as business service manager, he does economic development, but he also does all of our business licenses, tobacco and liquor. As we've been going through our liquor code periodically, we also occasionally go through our tobacco code. And we realized there were some things that absolutely needed to be changed. It had been a while. So the 3 big ones are right on the front of the memo. The first one is that we didn't have a definition that actually effectively mentioned alternative tobaccos, which is basically vaping. So in e-cigarettes. So we put a definition in there to cover that. The other thing was we have not a table, but there is a paragraph in the code that talks about licensing annually for tobacco. It was stepped up $5 or $10 here and there over the course of a few years. It's up to $105 a year, but it hasn't been updated since 2008. So Mike thought that at this point, given the 16-year gap, that it was reasonable to make it 150 even for licenses. For reference, there's 17 businesses that have tobacco licenses as of today. And then the big one was Illinois changed the law a couple of years ago on who can buy tobacco. So you have to be 21 now to buy tobacco in Illinois. It used to be 18. Our code still says 18. Now businesses still have to follow the state law because the state law supersedes us. But we figured we should clean it up and make sure that our law matches the state. So we did. Some other things that Mike put in here, I thought he did a really nice job of so he did beef up sections about the whole 18 to 21 is interesting because if for anyone here remembers liquor, once again, you have to obviously be 21 to buy liquor. But then at one point in Illinois, you had to be 21 to serve liquor. And then that got reduced down, I think, to 18 at some point. And now I've heard that I don't think it's passed it, but they talked about people being able to sell liquor dropping down to 18. Well, tobacco is interesting. So you have to be, like I said, 21 to buy tobacco, but you only have to be 16 in Illinois to sell tobacco. And there's actually exceptions for when you can sell it under the age of 16. Like if your family owns the business and you're working a family business or something like that. So I thought that was interesting. So Mike actually put something in here that we have a rule that says nobody under the age of 18 should sell tobacco to anybody unless the cash register electronically prompts the cashier to input the purchaser's date of birth. And it was just an added thing. It does by law, they can be under 18 to sell, but Mike said, well, we want to keep it 18 unless there's at least something more that shows that they vetted it out, put something in the system that the person buying it was of age. So that was another add-on he threw in there. Other than that, I also find it funny that we have a definition for vending machines. Unless I've missed something, I have not seen like a cigarette machine in the longest time. I don't even know if they still have those regularly, but we still have a definition for them just in case. I want you to know that. But there's a whole bunch of things here. So in these areas, this is important. This last one, tobacco products or alternative tobacco products may be sold through a vending machine only if, and he put in some caveats in there, within the line of sight of a licensee or person who has the authority or responsibility to sell tobacco or alternative tobacco in places where people under 21 are not permitted, and then places where alcoholic beverages are sold and consumed on the premises, and vending machine operation is under the direct supervision of the owner or manager. So basically we put some catches in there just in case someone tried to go up to a machine that dispenses. We want to make sure that they can only be allowed in certain areas where they're under supervision still. That's pretty much it, but it's just a cleanup. We thought about bringing it right to board, but since it's been a while, we thought we'd maybe have the board have some feedback if you had any.
Yeah, it looks good to me.
I have no issues with it.
Aurora, good. Great. Good. Great. Item 3, Steve.
Item number 3 is also a periodic review. Mike used to do this in his role as community development director, and Nathan's doing it now. And every few years, things change in the world as far as the types of businesses you see. And sometimes we don't even have zoning classifications for businesses that are becoming more popular. Things that, it's funny, Nathan will take you through some of them, but some businesses don't really exist anymore. And you just need to clean things up. And one of my favorite things is we have retail, permitted retail stores in the business districts, but then we go ahead and talk about like 13 different like specific retail stores, but they're all general retail, whether it's a shoe store or whatnot, that would still fall under a general retail category. So what we try to do is clean it up. Unless there's some kind of use, for instance, that we might want to call out separate. Nathan's going to walk us through some of the cleanup he did on all of our usage charts for all the districts. And he did take this to the Plan Commission a few months ago. And the one thing I do want to point out here, this question has come up recently. We have home occupation standards in North Aurora, but we don't have, it's not a licensed business because as a non-home rule entity, we can't really license businesses. We can have them register and we can zone them. So what we did this time was Nathan took home occupation and all the standards that we have for home occupations. He now listed them as a permitted use in all residential districts. But what it allows, because they are technically permitted now, but what it allows the board to do is if you ever want to add, let's say, a restriction beyond the current standards that we already have, you could, and we'll just add those to the zoning code. So with that, that's new. So I wanted to point that out. Nathan, go ahead.
Okay, so you all got the really thick packet of all the red line and green ads. I'm just going to hit some of the highlights for each. Overall, a lot of it was clean up for, we would have different terms in different sections. Would be called one thing in industrial and a slightly different thing in commercial, and the definition would be a third term that was sort of, so we did a lot of that type of stuff, trying to make sure that we use the same term in every section and that the definition matches that term and is used throughout. So there was a lot of that. In residential, mainly we just combined some things. So we listed, independent living, nursing home, assisted living. They were all listed separately. They were all permitted, but just, a big long list. So that's pretty much all one thing. So we just tried to consolidate where we could. In business, we added multifamily and mixed use development as a special use in the B3. So we want to build a mixed use development in block 1, but it wasn't even listed as something you could do in that zoning district. So that wouldn't work so well. So we added it to B3. We had multiple categories for entertainment uses. Indoor theater, auditorium, things like that. We kind of combined those into, entertainment, recreation facility, whether indoor or outdoor. Retail goods, as Steve was saying, there's a general retail goods and services. So we actually had shoe repair and hat repair listed in several places. I don't know how popular hat repair stores are, but, that can fall under general retail, I think, just fine. Same thing with bars. So when I first got here, I was looking for where like a bar or tavern would be permitted, and I couldn't find it. And David in our office says, well, it's under C for cocktail lounge. I'm like, oh, so we put on our leisure suit and go to the cocktail lounge. Got it. Okay. So things like that, we made sure it's now bar or tavern and the definition matches that, and it's all in the same area. In industrial, we did not have a listing for data centers, which are very popular now. There's several being built in Aurora right on Eola Road. We've gotten some inquiries here in North Aurora to build them. So we didn't even have that listed anywhere. So we added it as a special use. There are some things you want to look at with those. They're nice because they don't have a lot of trucks, but they could potentially use a lot of water or a lot of power. So we put them in as a special use in the industrial districts and in ORI. But again, we didn't even have a definition for it. We didn't have it listed anywhere. So we added that. We cleaned up light, medium, and heavy industrial as well as food users. So we better defined food users, which do have a lot of water demand. So we made sure they were their own categories that had those listed separately. In the ORI, again, we looked at data centers and food processing. We also updated contractor office. So that's kind of a hard one. We have a bunch along 31 in the B3 district. And an office is fine, but usually a contractor office comes with a contractor's yard that has a bunch of junk in it. And those were listed separately. So we kind of put them together. We created some standards for, if you have a yard, you have to screen it and what you have to do. So just kind of clean that up. Chapter 11 are those use standards. So it's, if you're in the chart and you have a use, if there's standards that go with it, there's a little thing right next to it that says, C section, whatever. So we updated all of those and added better use standards for contractors' offices and gas stations and recreational facilities. And then the definitions, we tried to go through, there were definitions for things that haven't been in the code since the 80s that were still in there. We took those out. We made sure all the definitions of the terms we just talked about were defined and used the same term, so it actually matched. And so hopefully that will just help, it'll help me because I'm still having trouble finding things in the code, but hopefully it'll help all the users of it. So that's kind of the high level. I have the whole PDF of all 70 pages. If there's a specific area you want to dive into, we can have at it.
Can we talk about the whole businesses?
Sure. Let me, just find it here. All right, so here are the home occupation standards as they currently are. So we added it to the chart in residential so that it's actually listed as a use and tied to these standards. But we haven't changed these standards. So if you want to add things to them. Uh-oh.
Very fine print.
Looks good on my screen.
If it doesn't work, I can.
Go on.
But while you're doing that, I'm gonna give them a little background while I'm asking. So there's a house in North Aurora, a big house, relatively new. I think it took several years to build it, but he built this garage because the house is so big. The garage is 2-story, like a warehouse. And he's running a construction business out of it. He has forklifts and bobcats and trucks. And this has been an ongoing concern of mine and a few other people that he's, up at 6 a.m. loading trucks up and stuff. And I'm curious where we're at with this. 1A would be the garage is super huge, and I'm surprised. I know that we have, I guess, a code, and I like to see if we can change that. This garage is just humongous. And then, like I said, he brings F plates home. There's multiple trucks, trailers. It's like, to me, it's our home, not a warehouse or zone for business. And one thing would be if they did the work maybe in the garage, loaded everything, and nobody would kind of see it. But it gets to the point where it's just over and over and over again. And
House, is it in an unincorporated area?
it's on Deer Path.
So is it unincorporated?
It's in North Aurora.
But unincorporated, how does he get around that with zoning?
He is in the village.
Yeah.
It's like the last house.
No, there's a couple more beyond him, but yeah.
Right
So
before
is he
you
in
turn in.
violation? Restrictions?
So the house had a permit. It was built, with a permit. Operating the business out of there kind of depends. So here on the screen are our current home occupation rules, and they're generally pretty generalized. So
Shall be conducted.
they have it must not interfere with surrounding properties and things like shall be conducted entirely within the dwelling unit. Shall not be established, prior to the family taking the home. Only one non-resident may be employed and work not more than 25 hours. Home occupation shall not generate excessive vehicle or pedestrian traffic. Shall not generate noise, solid waste, vibration.
So do we list actually what occupations you can do at your house or no?
But it does, so there isn't a list of these are prohibited,
Yeah.
these you can do. It's just these generalized
Yeah.
standards. And sometimes that gets hard to enforce, is him backing the trailer up more noise than somebody backing their camper up, is that too much noise? So you start to get subjective. Some towns do have, general standards like this, but then say that these particular uses are expressly prohibited. can't have a tow truck company, you can't have a car repair, you can't have, things that
Mhm.
would
I mean,
be obnoxious.
yeah, I mean, he has racks in there. I mean, it's all construction. He loads up stuff and off he goes, and it's just forklift out in the driveway and skid steers. And it's like, that's not the idea of having a home, packing up a trailer for your, whatever, put your go-kart on versus somebody that has multiple trucks, racking. I mean, it's a big time operation, and you really shouldn't be able to run that out of your house.
Well, if they've
Well, it
got more than
seems-
one employee, he's already in
I
violation.
was say, it sounds like he violates most of these.
Yeah,
On this
as you
list.
keep going down, no delivery of merchandise except from like UPS. No permanent alterations to the house, no more than 20% of the area devoted to it. So, a lot of these would apply. It's a question of, so for a different example, we have someone working on cars on Long Avenue. And when we first approached them, they said, no, these are my cars. Okay, there's like 20 cars. And they said, no, they're my friend's cars. I'm just helping them out. Okay, I asked for police help and they went out and said, yeah, the plates are from all over. So it's not registered to the house. It's not, so,
But if you have this big garage with a lift, then that's okay. I mean, I guess that's my thing. I can't see having car repair and construction companies, and I can, somebody wants to be an accountant, have a pencil on the desk in their house, but it's like, or hair or something, but it's like, this kind of stuff really shouldn't be allowed.
So, we can do some research. This would be the time to do it.
I mean, you can see somebody put a lift in there. I mean, I could see that happening, say you do it all inside, but that's still not, I mean, you can have, yeah, right.
So we can look into, since we're ending all
Yeah.
this stuff. This should not be just, you're never going to be able to comply with all of
Yeah, well, like the mechanic, if he has chemicals in there to wash things, or who knows what, you know what I mean? It's like,
That's, that's listed in here too. I mean, all these things
Yeah.
are already in violation. So how would we enforce what we already have? Like, how are these enforced?
With the one on Deer Path, it would be enforced, for instance, if they had the heavy equipment, which is on the list. If you see them operating the heavy equipment out there, that's one way we can,
Who enforces it? Like our
we
code?
do.
But
It's a zoning
zoning?
violation.
yeah, I mean,
So, I mean,
but even the thought of having a construction company in a garage that's, 50 feet tall and 100 feet deep, but it's like, even if he doesn't make noise, it's like, that's, the spirit of living in the neighborhood isn't having a construction company because you can build a big garage because you got a big house. I guess I mean, the garage is super huge, and it's like, when they said he was within his rights to build this garage, and I can see if you want to put store cars or your, hobby stuff.
Yeah, and
But-
even if you're a GC and you have a home office.
Yeah,
That's
that's
one
one
thing,
thing.
but you're not running the business. out of
Right.
it.
I mean, they have vans and they have trucks and they have, and then it just doesn't seem right to do at your
Sure.
house.
I was writing building contractor down, but I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, an office for the, like, if,
Oh, he
want
wrote
to
that in
run
here.
their
I think
office
that's what
out
we
of there,
just saw.
that's
He
what-
said,
yeah.
something like that. Oh yeah, that's not a problem. Architect or all that stuff, but got forklifts and nobody, you can't do anything until somebody sees it, but everybody knows what's going on.
Kevin, can you go through with a zoning violation? What is the process other than, finding them? What is the process to take someone through the actual zoning code?
Well, I mean, if it's not a special use issue, it's just straight zoning violation. It's like any other ordinance violation.
How do you get them to stop once, aside from fines though, what is the actual?
You take them to
stop?
court and you seek it, you get an injunction, but you have to go the route of the fines first. And if it continues and that doesn't work, then you just take it to court and ask for an injunction.
And some of these things, it's a home occupation, right? So if they're doing it in the garage or in the backyard, you may need a warrant to go in there and find stuff.
Right, an administrative warrant The standard for getting one's lower than probable cause for a crime because it's only an ordinance violation, but you still just can't wander into the
Well,
backyard.
The reason I asked is it doesn't go to, I wanted to verify it goes to the courts. It wouldn't go through our local adjudication process. It
Well,
can
that
go-
we could start there. Again, if that doesn't work, then and you want compliance, then you have to ratchet up and take it to court.
But we have the right to go straight to court if we want.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, another one would be like having a salvage yard at your house, where you scrap and cut up trucks, and some of that should be listed as 0, no tolerance. Not like, oh, if you do it in your garage, or if you're planning to clean it up in a week, or it's like, that's another one. It's just some of these things. It's like I said, the spirit of living in a neighborhood and a house isn't have that kind of stuff. So I'd like to see some things excluded, saying, hey, you can't do this, can't do that.
Sure. So before we bring this back for a final vote, I'll do some research on what surrounding towns are doing. I remember from Romeoville, we had a list of expressly prohibited things, included like funeral home and gun
right.
shop and
Oh,
like
yeah.
some stuff that you're like, wow.
You want to embalm somebody in your house,
right.
probably. Yeah.
I know we had that in our code back then, but I'll see, what the towns here in the Fox Valley are doing. And then I'll come up with a proposal of these ones should be prohibited.
Can you tell me, Steve, about the garage based on the house? How
so-
that works?
Sure. So Mayor Gaffino had brought up that the house, when it was built, it was altered in a way to allow this person to have their business out of their garage. Nathan, you can jump in and.
I didn't say that. I'm just saying he built a big garage, and his idea probably was to do that, but no, he didn't alter it. You know what I'm saying? It's like, yeah, it
Well, I mean, he
was
built
just
the
to build a
house
big garage on a house, and then he started operating, but I don't think nobody knew
Correct.
exactly what
So
that was gonna
basically,
be.
when you build a house, it's different if you build the garage as a part of the attached house versus if it was a detached garage, where if it was a detached garage, it can't be bigger or taller than the main structure on the property. But when it's attached, and this is where I'll defer to Nathan, when it's attached, there is no actual limitation because it's all considered part of the structure.
Yeah, it would just be the bulk rules of the whole structure. So, the setback, front setback for the house. If your building is half garage and half house, but it's all one building, still just following the front setback, side setback, the rear setback, whereas a detached garage has a whole separate set of rules. It's an accessory structure.
So if the board wanted to regulate it, you'd have to do it by square footage or something, or percentage of the actual livable portion of the house, is what I'm assuming.
The only bad thing, like I said, if you have a hobby, you have a whatever, couple of cars, or I don't know, you're like doing woodworking on the site. Yeah, that's the only bad thing,
Yeah,
it's
so
just-
some of the McHugh houses, most of them have 3 cars. Some of them have the 4-car tandem. So the one that goes really deep back, that you can store all kinds of fun.
But it's a height of this garage that blows my mind. This thing is like 50 feet. I mean, it's huge. It's
So
huge.
maybe you get at it through garage door height, maximum. Something like that.
I don't know. Yeah, it's just one of those things that. So
Of course, any change that we make to the code in that respect isn't going to affect this property. They'll be
Right.
grandfathered, but
Right.
it would prevent something else like it from happening in the future.
And it's hard for code to go out and just happen to be the right time. If the person's doing that stuff, they load up in the morning, they skedaddle, or they come back at night with all their equipment. Code's not working. Things happen, and then the next day they start over again, and it's just like. So,
Yeah, it's a little harder to go after zoning stuff, but it is like the mayor said, if you witness it and you kind of log the times and stuff, it probably makes a better argument if you can put a bunch of it together in totality at once to prove it. Since I've been here, we've gone through only one that I can remember where we actually had a business violating the zoning, and that was the mechanic that was working out of the old Marathon gas station that we bought and knocked down for where Mocha is. And in that case, they were operating the mechanic when the gas station was there, but once the gas station closed, the gas station was the primary business, and mechanic shops were only allowed in gas stations if they were ancillary. Once the gas station closed and the guy was still operating a mechanic shop, he became the primary business on the lot. And so we had to basically go through that. And what we ended up doing was told them the code, I think we gave him like 6 months and we said, listen, go find a new place. And we worked with him and they ended up leaving.
Anything else?
Well, since this was an issue a couple of years ago, where does like the short-term rental topic fit in any of this?
So, still not allowed. I did add a definition of short-term rental in there, just to make sure, and matching kind of what we've done before about 30 days and everything. So I made sure I added that into the definition section, so it's in there. But it's not listed as permitted anywhere. So
Okay. Yeah, I saw the bed and breakfast listing is still in there. I guess I didn't
Yep.
look at short-term rental.
I made
Okay.
sure the bed and breakfast
Yeah.
definition was different than short-term
Yep.
rentals so that we can tell those apart. The difference being a bed and breakfast, you get cooked breakfast.
You get
and-
food, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
guess
see the
in-
short-term rental.
I
Thank you.
guess
If you
in
have an
theory-
Airbnb, you could make breakfast in the morning for your guests.
I think that was when Mike went through it prior to Nathan. I think that was the big distinction, was the whole idea when people were arguing, how can you tell us we can't have an Airbnb other than the state law saying short-term rentals are defined 30 days or less, was the fact that the bed and breakfast actually required you to provide hospitality and cook for the people. And so that was kind of an interesting one. I mean, that's a good question since it got brought up. Maybe I'm not sure we can do this or not, but can you actually exclude bed and breakfasts and just make them non-permitted? Because we don't have any in town. And so the question would be, would we ever want a bed and breakfast in a residential neighborhood?
Well, if somebody had to come to us to ask for permission, then you could grant it.
I think we have to allow them somewhere, but for instance, they wouldn't, we could say that they can't be in most zoning districts. Maybe they have some multifamily zoning districts, or I don't know. We can't outright prohibit them, but there's other ways that we could limit them.
Which I think they are. They're limited. to
Business
certain-
areas.
Yeah, I think they're not allowed in every residential.
But to trustee
And
Nedvedge's point.
there's
sorry.
special use.
With trustee Nedvedge's point about the short-term rentals, that's what we tell people, the state law, the 30-day short-term rentals. This actually comes up more than you think, not Airbnb and VRBO, but just people renting rooms. That comes up quite often where we'll see postings and neighbors might reach out and say, someone's renting rooms. And then we go through that. They technically are allowed to rent a room out to somebody as long as it's more than 30 days. So then the question becomes, since we're here right now, I mean, if you wanted to add something specific about short-term rentals, not just the definition, and zone them, I guess you could technically put that in right now if you wanted to. Just make them all special uses or whatever in every district, or non-permitted.
Would you say that if you're renting a room, you're a boarding house and those aren't allowed in single-family zoning districts?
Yeah, you could create a boarding house definition and limit them to certain, limit them out of certain districts and allow them only in certain districts.
I'm a little confused with the short-term rental concept. I thought this was, we had an issue with someone in a neighborhood a couple of years ago doing just that, short-term renting, and it created all kinds of problems with their neighbors who complained to us. So are we going to then allow the short-term?
No, what we were saying is that by state law, they define a short-term rental as anything less than 30 days. So because our zoning code didn't actually mention Airbnb or VRBO, but we don't allow short-term rentals in a residential district, we were able to tell them, we never outright banned Airbnbs. What we did is we went to the house that was in that neighborhood and we said, from now on, you have to have 30 days or more. So they still were allowed to post on Airbnb, but they had to do only 30-day rentals. And at first, the owner was actually providing lease information to show us that she was booking far out and booking these long-term rentals. But then eventually those started to dwindle off, and I think she ended up selling the house.
Okay.
All right. Anything else for number 3? All right, move on to number 4. Steve?
All right, the last item on the agenda tonight is purchasing policy update. Lots of updates for everybody today. The purchasing policy, it's a couple years ago, we went back and we changed my spending authority up to 25,000, matching the state bid. At the time, we talked about things being more expensive and with inflation and everything. We had a unique situation come up a couple weeks ago during our road program. We were able to work it out and it came in just under $25,000. But what we're seeing now is change orders and things like the road program. You're talking about a project that's $2 million roughly. And if all of a sudden they get to a situation in the program where additional work was unforeseen, and like they dig into, in this case, the most recent one, if I remember correctly, it was the soils as they were digging out some curb.
Yeah, the road base was subpar, so they had to do a little extra digging out to get to solid ground, and then they add stone in. Otherwise, if we wouldn't do that, the road would fail pretty quickly. So it's kind of unforeseen because you don't necessarily know what you're dealing with until you strip the old blacktop off.
And that road, and the road program specifically, because that's the most expensive annual program we do. And that is the one where you would actually get a lot of change orders, a few here and there, because they're out in the field and things are unknown when you're digging until you see it. But in this case, what ends up happening is if you don't approve the change order immediately, they have to stop construction because it needs board approval, in which case then they're pulling all their equipment from, and they have to leave that street. And if they have to go to other job sites, they could be gone paving roads in another town because their schedule didn't allow them to delay here. So, and then the residents are missing a chunk of curb for, a couple of weeks, and the roads are still ripped up for a month. So in this case, we were able to figure it out, but it's just getting to that point where we're seeing things be more expensive and closer to 25,000. Jason's going to walk us through a very short presentation, but we were looking to change one item to make change orders in these types of programs similar to our emergency purchases. I think I just stole all of Jason's thunder, but basically what it is if there's an emergency purchase where delaying makes no sense, like it's impractical to delay something that clearly needs to be done and it's within reason, in an emergency, I can contact the mayor and get approval from him to do that. And then it goes on the next agenda and the village board sees the whole thing, sees what was approved and votes on it just after the fact. So obviously the accountability is anything that I would approve that's over 25,000 has to go before you anyway. So obviously no one here would do anything that's unreasonable. But with that, Jason's going to walk us through.
Yeah, so in the change orders over 25,000 or more section, we have this sentence in there that says, in certain situations where it's impractical to delay the project while waiting for board approval, the village administrator may, at his discretion, approve change orders up to $25,000. And then the village board meeting or approval would happen the next meeting. This is kind of some language that was left over from a couple of years ago. If you remember, the village administrator used to have a $15,000 spending authority. And in June of 22, we increased that up to $25,000. So in our current policy, the village administrator already has the $25,000 spending authority. So for this one, it says he can do them up to $25,000. That already happened. So we're just cleaning the language up. And as Steve mentioned, what we're proposing is we broke that section out of and made it its own. And we're saying that the village administrator may, at his discretion, approve change orders over 25,000 upon concurrence from the mayor. So if there was something that came up, he would talk to the mayor, say, here's what's going on. We want to keep these crews in here working so they don't have to remobilize and come back out and cost us more money. If he's in a concurrence with it and approves it, then we'll go ahead with the work and then we'll bring it back for formal approval at the next meeting. So, and Steve mentioned, this is kind of how emergency purchases works, where if something happens, we don't have time to sit around and wait. So we got to make a decision right now. They would figure that out and then we'd do the formal approvals later.
And just a quick thing about that. We went back and forward. We matched it to the emergency purchasing because it was already in our policy. Truth was, I didn't want to have just an endless amount of money either. I don't want you to feel like, oh, Steve's going to start approving things for $50,000 or whatnot. But it was hard to come up with an arbitrary number. Is it 30? Is it 35? I don't know. I mean, sometimes we don't see a lot of these change orders, but we are trying to be proactive because that really would have messed up the road program this year. And, I have our engineer and Brian telling me, like, if you don't do this, it's going to take a couple of weeks, where we're not going to be able to pave that road and it's going to sit like that. So on those things, we were able to figure it out this time, but we're getting up to that spending limit more often. So my question really was, if you wanted to change something, would you do it this way, or would you feel more comfortable having an actual maximum limit still in there?
way. I like it this way because I like how you've added concurrence with the mayor because there's some accountability given to it. I agree. I don't think an arbitrary number is gonna make a hill of beans of a difference because I don't, like you said, I don't want a road not being completed for 2 weeks or a month or whatever because it's gonna cost us more in the long run.
I have some questions about it, to be honest with you. Under the current circumstances, there's no problem with this at all, you know, and it gives you the flexibility that you need, and I don't want to take that away from you in any way. However, if you take a look at this and look at it real closely, in 20 years from now, you're not going to be here, the mayor's not going to be here. That sure opens an opportunity up for misuse of funds when only two individuals can determine an unlimited amount of spending. So my concern would be what is the long-term impact on this kind of a change? And what I'd like to see it reworded to some degree anyway, to guard against that possibility.
Well, first, trustee Lowry, I'd like to tell you, I may just be here 20 years. You never know. No.
All right, let's go 30 years. The policy is going to be here a lot longer than anyone sitting here tonight.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I know.
No, I know exactly what you're saying, and that's what I struggled with too. So, looking at this, I mean, you could do it this way and just put a cap, but the accountability is that it does go to the village board regardless.
Well, what happens if a decision is made between the administrator and the mayor at some point in the future, and it's a corrupt decision based on because they have playing patsy with whoever the contractor might be, let's say, and the board then disapproves it. How would that work out?
No, you're exactly right. The main flaw to this setup would be is if, you know, like you said, someone makes a dumb change order decision. It's a lot of money. The mayor says it's fine, and then it goes to the board. You've already expended the money. So I totally agree. So there's accountability in that sense that it does go to the board, but you're right, the money's been expended. So that's why where I'm coming from is we obviously want to do right by the residents. And we know, especially with the road program, it is not, every year we try to make it better and less inconvenient for people, but the road program is inconvenient. You're ripping up roads and curbs and driveway fronts and things like that. And to delay those types of projects over, in this case, it was roughly $1,000. And look at our next meeting is not till September 16th. So had that happened not 2 weeks ago and happened more around now, we'd be waiting a month or having a special meeting. So I guess my thought would be is if you wanted to combat that in any way, you can write it like this, but still put, if you made you feel better, you could still put a cap in there that, you know, that says, but shall never exceed this dollar amount.
Yeah, well, it doesn't make me necessarily feel bad. I just kind of think about the long-term impact of it.
And the board always
when
has the
it's-
right to change the policy down if someone, but once again, I get your point because it would be after the fact. If someone abused it, then you're like, hey, we had to change this policy.
I mean, even up to $20,000. Like,
But
if you can do whatever you
looking for some
want.
clarification, because this is an overage, over something that we've already budgeted. So we've budgeted this job to be 100,000 and now we have 25,000 in overage. Is that correct?
So it's funny. That's an excellent way of looking at it. So with the road program is budgeted for a certain amount, right? We go out to bid and we get amount, but it does, a change order could be more money if they come back and say, well, it was supposed to be 2 million, but end up being 2.1 million because
So
we
if
added this in.
So potentially we can get around this to Mike's point, maybe if we would say a certain percentage, like you have approval up to 10% of an overage or 20% of an overage, because then that way we have a little bit of a safeguard so that you're not making a $500,000 decision, you know, on something that now let's say the change order is for twice.
The irony of
Yeah.
that is we actually were thinking to be more protective because at one point, Jason and I were talking about percentages, but 10% of 2 million is $200,000. So when you look at those, like the percentage doesn't seem like a lot, but then but 10% on a $50,000 contract is only 5. So when you're looking at that, I said, you know, that's a lot on a road program, $200,000, and I wouldn't even feel
But it's
comfortable.
something because the way it's worded has nothing.
Yeah, but you wouldn't, if it wasn't that much money, you wouldn't approve that.
And that's what I think trustee Lowry's getting at is in my capacity, I wouldn't feel comfortable, but someone else might feel more than comfortable being like, oh yeah, 200,000, go ahead. I get that's what you're saying.
Yeah, that's my concern I thought about when I
Sure.
read this. And
I would argue it, let's say in a scenario that $50,000 is approved and it's not really an emergency. I mean, you're a lot of, the change orders are getting done on the fly, and the money they're getting paid after the fact. It's going to be coming to the board in all likelihood, in some cases, maybe in most cases, before the actual payment is made.
Well, that's a good point because the change order would actually go on the bills list, which would not have
Right.
been approved until it goes to the board.
And I would argue, so everyone's presumed to know what our code says, and it's public record, so that if a decision like that was made and it's not really an emergency, and the board says no, we're not paying that, I would argue that the contractor's tough out of luck. It wasn't authorized, and it's in our code. They're deemed to know what's in our code. It wasn't an emergency. I mean, I would be willing to take that kind of a stand if that's, how it played out and it really wasn't an emergency. So that's it's not something you want to rely upon, but it's something.
And I want to point out to Brian, you can answer this better than I would, but on the road program, there's so many line items for unit prices for things like asphalt and gravel and concrete. So there is fluctuation in the quantities that are in there. So sometimes actually will come in under, depending on how much they use. So can you explain how, like, in some places the quantities might change?
So basically everything's been on quantities. So, everything you do like asphalt is per ton, and it's kind of, they figure out what we need. So it could only be changes in certain line items that they charge, but then there could be other line items that come in under budget. So like when you get to the total of the project at the end, it could actually come in under budget, but you could have had a change order for over 25,000.
Right. So
there's other line items that kind of go up and down. Like if we have like $50,000 budgeted for traffic control, and they only used 20,000 of it, then that would kind of go down, decrease your price. But then if there was a change order of 25,000, it would increase it, but you would still be under that 5,000 for the total of the project. So like a change order is kind of done through like quantities in the road program, because everything is quantified. So they know, the tons of gravel and everything. So that's kind of what they go by.
Yeah, and we had a
That makes
conversation
sense.
about that quite a bit, because at one point, Brandon, our engineer, he'll say, hey, Steve, this might be $25,000 more in concrete, but we might be 50,000 under in asphalt. So even with the change order, we're actually still going to be under budget. But to me, the definition of a change order is really when the scope of the project changes. So it's, yes, dollar amounts like being higher than expected, but when someone comes in and says, I was going to only do this much concrete, but now I'm going to add a sidewalk here, that's a change to a contract. That wasn't in the bid. What Brandon's saying is when you're doing like asphalt and you're adding like 3 feet of asphalt because you miscalculated something to be 97 feet, but it should have been 100. It's not a change order. You just missed 3 feet of asphalt, so you just extended 3 feet of asphalt, and that's where the quantities come in. So in this case, it was more curb work than needed, and we're digging. That's why it became a change order, because it was beyond the scope of what they had bid.
And the contractors do use the prices that are in the contract. So it's not like they're coming up with a number saying that, we're going to charge you this much extra. It's because it's already been agreed upon as, the prices. So
well, I'm just saying, to the wording, if we could word it in a way that might kind of have some kind of a safety check against any future abuse of it, I'd be comfortable with it. That's all. And what Kevin was saying, I didn't really catch what your argument was, but
Yeah.
Are you saying there's some kind of a fail safe plugged into this, or?
Well, I mean, there's a general proposition that, for instance, if Steve, entered into a contract with someone without getting it approved by the board, it never went to the board for approval. It wouldn't, it wouldn't be authorized and we couldn't be held liable as a village because it wasn't properly authorized. It's that kind of an idea. There's, we actually had an issue many years ago now with someone who had a multi-year contract that went beyond the mayor's term. And we, when we realized that, we just stopped paying and said, we're not paying you anymore. Because, the authorization wasn't valid beyond the mayor's term, even though the contract actually kept going. And we won that argument because, the board is the authority for the village, and, the board is the one who puts the parameters on spending and so on. So if it goes outside those parameters.
So Kevin could make Kevin. So Steve could make a change order and then commit to it, but not pay it, and then it would wait for board approval before we actually spent the money.
So what would happen in this scenario, and let's just use the one that we just had. Had it been a change order that was over 25,000. And by this language, I could have called Mark. Mayor could have said, yes, this makes sense. It was, going to be a slightly over. Okay, don't delay this road program for 2 more weeks. So we go ahead and do that. But then it shows up on the next agenda for the village board to actually vote on. So you actually get to see the change order and the number, the dollar amount, everything. At that same meeting, most likely would also be when you would see the invoice on the bills list. So
okay, so because we're taking a lot of time on this, I'm feeling a little bad about this for the other members because they're not chiming in with me. But all I'm asking is that you guard against that concern I expressed for the future. Mark's not going to be here forever. You're not going to be here forever. But the policy could be here for a lot longer than any of us could be. And there is an opportunity within it for some unscrupulous individual to abuse it. And that's all I'm saying. Sure. Now, if what Kevin is saying is that the expenditure wouldn't happen until after the board approval anyway, then there's no, that negates any concern I have,
I don't have any problem. We went to this because the language is already there, but I don't have any problem with, and I know we go back to the arbitrary number, but if there's a number that the board was comfortable with, we can always change that number. If we butt up against, and I'm just making up a number, let's say it's 40,000. You get up to 40,000 in a few years and things are more expensive. You're like, oh, well, we can always make that number. We can always change the purchasing policy. Jason and I live by this purchasing policy, which is why it's the irony of this is we're also pointing out that we're trying to do something, but we're also pointing out the flaws in it too, because we don't want the board to ever think that we're just spending money without, accountability. And I know where you're going. So that's what I'm saying. If you want to throw a number on there, that's fine. The last thing I want to do is delay major projects over like $1,000 or something like that. That's all pointless.
Can we?
Like it the way it is. I think we've already got 2, maybe 3 layers of accountability on this. So I'm fine with it.
And this is only for change orders. Like this is not just any amount of money for any project kind of thing. It is just for change orders.
That's a good point. It's only on contracts that have already been approved by the board.
Yeah.
And we were
that's not that's a good point, but that really doesn't. It's not you. It's not Mark. I don't have any issues with that. Hey, let's go ahead and do this as long as everybody here is still here in terms of making a decision anyway. My first thought was in the future, if this policy persists for a long time, that's all. And I don't want to belabor the point. I'll acquiesce to the will of the majority here. If they all think it's a safe way to do it, then I'll go along with it. But I'm just bringing this point up to make everyone aware that there's a possibility of potential misuse of this in the future by
I have another
unless there's some way, some phrase in there that might.
Would it help you if, because I want everyone to feel comfortable with this since it is me spending money, we can put a phrase in that says something along the lines of, they're in the emergency purchasing section of the policy. I think I'm supposed to get concurrence of the mayor, but I think I'm supposed to notify the board. I think that it might have a phrase that says that. So maybe we can add a line that says, in the event the change order is to exceed this, the village administrator shall notify the mayor, get concurrence and notify the board prior to the next board meeting or where it will be placed for approval or something like that. So at the time it's happening, you're aware that it's happening before the meeting even starts.
I mean, can we add language that like this is a 1-year policy at a time where it has to be,
I thought that too. We might have some kind of
to be
sunset
board
on that.
approved once a year or something like that? Or I know we've reviewed our purchase policy in my 3.5 years
I like
multiple
that
times.
idea.
So
That would be,
it's not something that we're all surprised about. We do review this quite a bit. So
Yes, this and the HR manual are two of our most important policies that we update almost annually.
I like
Yeah.
that. I thought that same thing, Tom, maybe put some kind of timeline on it, then bring it up for review and we have to revote it. And as long as everyone's here still doing that, then that would satisfy that concern I have as far as I can see.
Like an annual review of the purchase policy.
Or
could
notify,
do
or
it like
both, and notify the
in May
board
before the
members by
budget year
email
starts
or
or something.
something that's gonna
You
happen.
know, we added something last year, maybe 2 years ago, but we added more transparency when our budget process. We put the list of vendors that we know in totality that we expect will be over $25,000 throughout the year. They'll go into Napa Auto Parts, for instance, and you buy $500 worth of stuff for Public Works, and it just adds up over time when you keep going and getting stuff. So we could, and now we put that on an agenda when we approve the budget that May. We also list those vendors that we expect based on previous years of these are the ones we expect to exceed 25,000 with multiple purchases throughout the year. We could do at the same time, we could simply put an item on the agenda that night that says, annual review of purchasing policy or something like that. And because it's all related to the budget. And this way Jason won't forget to put it down. I'll just put it on that same meeting potentially. If the board wants. And so we leave the language if you want it
Something
like
that
this,
might
and we'll
be, I
just,
think, if you think about it, that might help, don't you?
well, there might be other things that you come up with every year too.
Don't you think that would
Yeah.
suffice? Yeah,
It's a legitimate point.
like yeah.
Yeah.
To
Okay.
review it once a year or
Yeah.
once every 2 years or something like that, yeah.
I'm gonna circle back. I still got a question about the over or the change order. So
Oh.
let's say the project's coming in, it's $100,000 cheaper, hey, we gotta add another sidewalk over here. Somebody's approach, I think we did it on Hickory. You did the whole approach, the apron. Is that a change order or is that because we're under $100,000 under budget that it doesn't kick this 25,000 level or what's?
Well, and it wouldn't have got to the $25,000 level if it was an apron. So in those cases, Brian will just simply come to me and say, hey, we screwed up this apron pretty bad. We need to replace it. And then I say, okay. That's specifically what happened on Hickory.
Well, let's say
so.
it's something that's more than that, but we're under budget. Would that still,
No, if it's over $25,000.
doesn't matter if we're under? or
Right.
above?
And if it wasn't something that we planned on before, like replacing someone's entire driveway
Yeah.
in concrete, right, that's different. Then it comes back. When I first started here, one of the concerns I had, but we changed it, was in the road program, what I didn't think was appropriate was you would come in for a bid of, let's say, they would estimate $2 million of road program, but the bid would come in at like 1.5 million. And then immediately it'd be like, okay. The engineers would be like, well, we're $500,000 under, so we can do, 13 more roads. And we're like, whoa, hang on a second. You should have put those 13 roads in if they needed to be bid. And then, because I didn't want the whole idea was I wanted to make sure that the board knew what we were approving before we were doing things.
Plus for the contractor, it might have been cheaper if he knew they're gonna do 13
Correct.
more roads per square foot, maybe it came down or
So to
something.
me, I agree, Mark. And that's why, to me, that always to me felt like a change order, even though you were still going back out and getting you were getting basically pricing from the contractor at that point. And I was like, no, that was not in the scope. That's a change order. At least that's my belief on that. So we've changed that ever since.
All right.
I just got one more thing here, and it's just a kind of a cleanup. We defined change orders really didn't mention like kind of what a change order was or when they're appropriate. So we just added some criteria, and here the 3 criteria. Change order was not reasonably foreseeable at the time the contract was signed. The change order must be relevant to the original scope of the contract, and the change is authorized by law and is in the interest of the village. So we just kind of try to lay out, say what's appropriate and what's not appropriate for a change order. So we can't just be doing, random things here and there. It's got to be all tied to the original scope. And that's it.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, that concludes our discussion. A motion to adjourn for the evening.
Motion
So
to
moved.
adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, the same. All right, have a good night.